How do you do that if you're, for example, I have a 23-year-old son and he's got a job. He's almost done with school. His wife's actually within the construction industry as well. What do you tell that 23-year-old that's coming out that looks at the home that's nearly double the price of what it was when he started college? How do you help him understand that it's just going to continue to go up? Hey, welcome to Networking Star. I am Jeffery Boyle, and today I'm going to talk with a pretty impressive dude. He's got everything from a best-selling book on Amazon. His best-selling book is called Financial Freedom. He's a mortgage broker, a speaker, a radio host, and a podcast host. And he's also a U.S. Navy veteran. So I'm always trying to find really interesting entrepreneurs. And Ed, you've got it's Ed Parcaut. I didn't even say his name.
That's okay.
But Ed, you've got a very, very interesting story. And what's interesting to me is all of these different things that you have. And now you've got a best-selling book on Amazon. So how do you decide which of the different things that you're going to pursue? And I can see a lot of them are related, but is it your background in the Navy, or give me a little bit of background on what drives you?
Well, I mean, the easiest way to put it, what changed my life was when I was 12 years old and my dad died of hairy cell leukemia from Vietnam, having the Agent Orange, and we became dirt road poor. And there's no other way to put it, because now everybody understands how poor that is. And I worked on my grandfather's dairy as a kid, realized I hated that type of work. And I said, I'm going to join the Navy, see the world. And I got to see San Diego. But I was able to get my bachelor's and master's while I was in. And then I just wanted to get into business because I was in the medical field and it just wasn't what I wanted. And so I just started pursuing business, and that, I think, the drive from the Navy, right? We have attention to detail. They teach you how to make a bed, and it's not about making the bed. It's about the attention to detail in making that bed. And so they teach that to you. They teach you a certain drive that you have. And I've had that ever since. And for me, it's just a matter of what's next. What's the next thing? And that's kind of how I've done I'd have to say, the last 15 years of my life.
I have a nephew that's in the Navy, and today is actually his birthday. So I was thinking about him and the difference in him now. In fact, I actually drove him down to the recruiter because he said to me, he said, I'm not very motivated. I don't have much direction. I'm like, yes, you do. And I actually drove him down to the recruiter, and it has been so cool to see this. You know, I always saw how amazing he could be, but to watch him now just flourishing with that direction and that attention to detail, I can really see what you're saying. Yeah. And so, you know, how do you go then from the Navy? What did you start first? Because like you say, you're a mortgage banker and obviously a radio show and podcast host afterwards. Where did you start after you left the Navy?
Well, when I first got out, it was in the early 90s. And so there was an issue in the real estate market, right? So I really wanted to get into real estate, some type of doing something in real estate. And when I first got out, it just wasn't the time. So I went back to what I knew, which was computers. And then I ended up working for, after I did that for a short period of time, my neighbor had a mortgage company, and I'm like, let me try this out. And I enjoyed working with people and explaining numbers and explaining how they can do certain things that they didn't think they could do. And we actually had a huge drop. It's kind of almost as bad as it is right now, but back then, you know, when you first started, you don't have any savings, you don't have anything, so it really affects you. But I went to work for us in Thousand Oaks in Southern California. It was a Blue Cross or Blue Shield, I can't remember now. And I was inside the sales department of selling to business. And for the next 6 months, I actually sold by the phone, and I actually started listening to what people were saying on the phone, tones and inflections in their voices, understand that. And so I took that from that and got back in the mortgage industry, and it's been here ever since. And I do really well because I can hear what people are saying, not just the words, but the tones and inflections in their voice.
Well, I think that that's where they actually say that women have that naturally better than we do as guys, because they can, it's just a part of, I guess, sniffing out the nonsense that we say. But what a valuable thing that is for the sales aspect of it. So as a mortgage broker, now what you do is you help people build personal wealth through home ownership. Explain that a little bit. Is it personal home ownership? Is it creating rentals? Explain that a little bit better.
It's all of the above, but first it's about getting that first home. A lot of people watch. So I've been doing the mortgage industry for 27 years, 26 years. And then I realized that there was only one of me, right? I mean, I can train my people, I can train them to do certain things, but truly when I sit down with somebody, what I say, what I do is totally different than everybody else. And so I decided to write the book the way I qualify people. And the first chapter is credit. And so I know what you asked me, but I'm going to get there. All right. So my book is written so I could reach more people, right? Same thing with the radio show. I started the radio show in 2018 because a lot of the younger people, I guess they call them millennials, watch their parents lose their home during the Great Recession and said, I never want to own a home because I saw what it did to my parents. And that's the worst thing, because most people build their personal wealth through buying their home. And then after they buy their first home, then they start thinking, oh, this is great. I want to do rentals. I want to do something else. I have a bunch of agents and their kids that I've helped buy triplexes, duplexes, those kind of things. And that's exactly what they wanted. It takes a unique individual who wants to go buy an apartment complex. Right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to do a multi-tenant. I love real estate. My wife was a realtor. My wife and I were realtors for a period in Costa Rica. I am just a believer that it is a way to create wealth. The way that I did, I'm sure, is completely different than the high level that you did. But my wife and I paid off law school with it. We paid off loans. And but it was always very difficult because we didn't necessarily have a mentor. How does your book then walk people through the process of getting that first home and getting from a home into a rental and then building your wealth around that?
Well, so on the book because I had a friend of mine's dad read my book, and he goes, this is the first investment book in real estate. The first chapter is about credit. And I said, that's because it's written from a mortgage person who helps you get the loan, not somebody helping you sell buy that house. And that's all they focus on. The loan is the most important thing. We're the ones that says you can do something or don't do something. If you don't, otherwise you got to have cash. So we look at your credit first. I explain the issues, and if you have any of these issues, how you can fix them. Then we look at the income, and I always say if you don't have the credit, you can't move any forward. So you fix your credit. If you don't have the income, well, it's another time in history do we have 9 to 10 million jobs supposedly out there that you can go get a better job. And that's why I tell people, go get a better job. It's not that big of a deal. If you go to a different job or normally gets a 15% pay raise. If you ask for more money at work, you mainly might get 6 to 7%. So I will go through every aspect the way I would qualify them and explain it to them. Then I explain the contract. I explain the new disclosures that we have. So when they sit down and they're talking with somebody, they already understand everything that person is going to tell them. Because in our industry, there's people like me, they're called loan officers or whatever you want, mortgage advisors, whatever they come up with their new frame. And they're going to tell you one thing and explain things, but they forget things because you're human. Right. That's why I wanted it in a book. You're not going to forget it now because it's right there in my book. And I give my book to every one of my clients. And then they say, well, what? I go, you didn't read chapter 3 on this page. It would have explained fully that. Oh, yeah, you're right. I didn't read your book. And I even gave it to my son and helped them, buy their first house, guided them. I couldn't do it for them. And I'm like, did you read my book? Oh, no. So you can only do so much.
I watched a reel, this is where we met, is on Instagram, and I watched a reel where you talked about the difficulty that people are having right now is they may have had a home that was a little bit too small, but they had it at 3% interest rate. And now all of a sudden, actually, as we're recording this morning, they talked about the interest rates being higher than they have been in the last 20 years.
22 years, actually.
Again.
Yeah.
So how do you explain to the person that The other thing, you can tell I love real estate. My wife tells me to quit looking at so many homes, but I just can't help it. But the homes aren't moving as fast because people aren't wanting to have that extra payment for that much bigger of a home. Explain it to people right now what they're going through and how it is that they get past that if they're looking to upgrade or if they're even looking to get their first home.
Yeah, well, that's so right now for most. So if you go back to 2021, we took $12 trillion of mortgage debt. There was $12 trillion. We took 10 trillion of it and put them in twos and threes. Those people are handcuffed to that house. They're not going to move. They're not going to sell. They're not going to do anything until rates get down to 4% again. That could be a year and a half to 2 years before we see any of that. See twos and threes again? Probably not in our lifetime, right? And the reason is, and this is, we all thought we were going to die during that period of time. We had COVID. Everything was shut down. Nobody knew what was going on. That's why rates went so low. That's the issue. If we never had those rates, we wouldn't have the problem we have today. We'd have no inventory across the whole United States. And on top of that, the inventory we have, it has multiple offers on it again. And in California, where I'm at, we're multiple offers and over asking. And we're only at, and I looked at the numbers in our county. We normally do 4,000 homes a month. 4,000 homes in the first 7 months of the year. And we're at 1,755 right now. Yeah. So that's just because when I was putting all these people on low interest rates, I'm like, this is going to kill the resale. And I knew it was going to.
And it did. Well, one of the things that during COVID, so I live in Boise, Idaho, and we have a huge influx of Californians during COVID coming here. And what was really interesting, even during that time, people can look back and say, oh, gosh, we had that 2-3% interest. It was very difficult to get a home then because you had the Californians who could sell their homes for significantly more, and they were coming in here and just buying it cash. Not only buying it cash, but buying sometimes sight unseen, and sometimes not just sight unseen. They're buying above asking and having a week or 2 weeks to be able to close it. And a person that's trying to do, purchase that with a loan, you just can't compete with that type of thing. So how is it that we get some of this stability back? Is it going to just be time, or what are we looking at for us to be able to have a little bit more security and more inventory out there?
Well, the builders need to build more, right? But they're afraid, just like everybody is, because they don't know what's going on. Plus, they can't build affordable housing. What I mean by affordable housing, meaning that, in the 300, 400 range, because all their permits and everything and all the stuff to get it ready is $100,000 on average. So if you want to I don't know how it is in Idaho, but in California, they had a program that came out, shared appreciation for all, which they gave 20% for you to go buy a house, right? They had 300 million. It was gone in 7 days. The issue is what that did was it took it from 3 offers on a house to 20 offers on a house for a period of 2 weeks. It raised the value of those homes, immensely because of that. That's not what we need to do. We need the government to come in and go, okay, all you builders, you need to fast track single family homes or duplexes or whatever it is for people to buy. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of all the fees associated with it. We're going to cover those fees for you, but it has to be sold to somebody, to live there. The other problem,
not an investor, not someone coming in to make it an Airbnb. You're talking about that first time home buyer or just a home buyer.
Exactly. Because what happens right now, 1 in 4 homes is being built to rent. Whole housing tracts are being built to rent. That's the problem. So they've taken builders from traditional building to sell them to building for these investors to rent them out. And these people have Google money, meaning that's where they made their money, and they have a lot of it. And I ran into this probably in 21 or you were 23. So end of 20 into beginning of 21, I'd never heard of it till I was in Austin, Texas. And I ran into a couple of the investors who were doing it.
Well, I love what you're saying, and maybe because it hits home, maybe it's because I love real estate, and I'm not the pro that some of the different people that come on my podcast are. I ran into another issue, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I really like that idea of getting rid of the red tape. That's what you're talking about. That's driving up these prices. I hadn't even considered that. Here's another issue. So about 2 hours away from where I live is a city called McCall. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's spectacular, but it sucks. Don't tell anybody about it. It's spectacular. You used to be able to. It's kind of like a Tahoe type of experience if you've never been there, and you used to be able to get a cabin on the lake about 7-8 years ago for $1 million. I saw one listed 4 weeks ago for $7.5 million, and it went for $14 million. It's pending right now for $14 million. And I asked some of the local business owners when I was there. I'm always just asking them questions. And I said, why are you open so little time now? And one of the owners of a really famous shop there, it's just called My Father's Place. She said, I can't get employees. Mm-hmm. The reason is that 70% of the new homes that are purchased here are purchased to be an Airbnb. So I can't get people to come. I can't afford to be able to pay people what they're asking for. So as a result of it, almost this entire city is restaurants, all these little small mom and pop shops that just make this city up. They're really reducing their hours. So how do you deal with that? Some of these places that the real estate is spectacular, but it's super coveted. But as a result of it being so coveted, they're really pushing out the ability for there to be any kind of infrastructure in the whole city. How is something like that to be resolved?
Tahoe did that by getting rid of the Airbnbs. They put a ton of houses on the market because of that. They made regulations about Airbnb, and it was too restrictive, and now they can't do it. That's how you fix that part, right? Because then they can't be Airbnbs. People have to actually live there or have it as a second home.
I think that'd do it. And close to where I live also is a pretty popular place. You probably, if you watch the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing on Netflix, you would have seen his home in Sun Valley. That's also about 2 hours from where I live. And they've put a big restriction. So only a certain amount of the homes can be used as Airbnbs. Well, what I'd love to hear, and I'm asking the questions, what are the questions that I'm not asking that I should be asking? Because I think that I know a little bit more than the Joe public, but there's certain things that that the public just doesn't. How can it recover? When will it recover? What do we need to know to be able to create this wealth again through home ownership?
Can I ask, when you say recover, what do you mean recover?
You're right.
What's your definition of recover?
That's even a bad question because it's so smoking hot that it's still exclusive.
And the problem is values. All right. So if we go back, I don't know if you heard any of my stories that I've done, because I was in a documentary last year called Hacking Real Estate, and they asked me questions about, why is there not going to be a bubble? And I explained to them, and they thought I was crazy. But if you go back to 2006, and we had all these loan programs, from 2003 to 2006, to put anybody in homes, you could buy 2 and 3 homes, and you only had to have basically a pulse. Well, what happened was they were buying all these new homes, and we thought we needed all these new homes for people to move into. But if you go back 31 years from there, that was when Roe versus Wade came in, and it plummeted birth rates for the next decade. So you fast forward, that's the average person to buy a home is 31 years old. Well, at that point in time, there was supposed to be a lot more 31-year-olds coming, but there weren't because of what that happened back then. So that's why the whole market fell apart, is people had 2 and 3 homes. And if you watch the movie The Big Short, he's sitting in the strip club and he's talking to the lady. She's like, I'm closing on my 3rd or 4th home. I can't remember what it is. He's like, how are you buying homes? And that's because of these programs that were put out by institutions that everybody was giving to everybody. And then that whole thing fell apart. And and I'm going to say one last thing, who should have went to jail on that one was the bond rating agencies, who rated those things as AAA when they should have been rated as D's or F's, and then nobody would have bought them. That's the problem. So if you fast forward, 10 years after that, 2008, we had to take all those homes off the market and put people in them, and finally we absorbed that. But during the same period of time, we didn't build anything. And then for the next 10 years after that, we really didn't build anything. And now you look today, we need 1.9, there's 1.9 million households being created each year. And that means multifamily for rent and single family homes to buy. The problem is we're at a 1.2 factor, 1.2 million factor of new homes and rentals, all that stuff. We're not even with what's needed today. So they're saying that we need 17 million homes built extra to get caught up. I know for a fact in California, we're 2.5 million homes short. So if they just do what we need each year, and they're not going to do another 200,000 homes, they're not going to do probably another 500,000 homes. So we're going to be into this for a very long time, probably 20 years. And then when 20 years comes, we have the pandemic babies coming, which is the generation just as big as the baby boomer generation coming of age and going to start buying homes, and there's not going to be enough homes. And so the problem is, if you have real estate, don't sell it, don't get rid of it, and buy as much as you can of it. And then so, get rid of it in 30 years.
So then how do you do that if you're, for example, I have a 23-year-old son, and he's got a job. He's almost done with school. His wife's actually within the construction industry as well. What do you tell that 23-year-old that's coming out that looks at the home that's nearly double the price of what it was when he started college? How do you help him understand that it's just going to continue to go up?
It's hard to explain to people, but if you ever go back, I remember as a kid coming to California from Colorado, my parents were like, we can't afford to own here. And that was in the late 80s, right? And now it's the same thing right now. It's all relative to a certain point. Yes, from the beginning, 2020, 21, and 22, we went up in California 22% to 26%. You guys went up because the people who sold out here went up there and raised your market up. But we're not going to see that huge exodus anymore. We're not seeing people leave like we did before. Because one thing about California that we have better than anybody else is weather.
Yeah.
And bugs. What bugs? You guys, I lived in Colorado as a kid. You pull up to a lake and you have these mosquitoes who want to carry you away.
Yeah.
Your cologne is DEET or off, right? And then I have people coming back from Tennessee and go, how was it? Oh, it was horrible. You can't do anything outside in the summer. You have this beautiful backyard and you get out there and everybody's like, can we go in the house? And we don't really, yes, we get hot, but we cool off because we have the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
That's and that's the difference between us and everybody else in the country. I mean, Oregon has it, Washington State have it, and all across this Pacific coast, it's expensive to live there. And I was shocked because my son bought his first home up in Yelm, Washington, because he's in the Army. He just transferred down from 4 years in Alaska. And I was shocked. There was how many homes are on the market. It wasn't a ton, but there was a lot. And the price point. I'm like, this is just like where we live. But, only difference, it was around a lake. But anyway, but it's just ridiculous. It's amazing the cost. It's going to continue to go up. So if you're not in the game, you're going to get priced out. In a few more years, 70% of the people will have to rent.
So how do you get in the game then? How do you talk to your son?
As a 22-year-old, well, he was lucky because he was in the Army, so he had a VA loan. So he was able to get in with no money down. And, it wasn't the lowest rate, but it was a decent rate and he can afford it. Somebody like your son who doesn't maybe not have the down payment or whatever, in my book, it talks about how to buy homes for your kids. You should be helping your kids buy a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex as their first home. You put them in one of the units and you can buy that thing FHA with 3.5% down.
Mm.
And then when they finally get all the kids, start having kids, whatever, go and buy that single family home and have that picket fence out front. But at first, buy the duplex, the triplex, or the fourplex for 3.5% down.
Now, I like that very much. So you're saying get that, you get a much lower loan, then you're able to go in, keep some of the revenue from the renter. Is that what you're suggesting as well, is keeping some of the revenue?
Well, you're going to because you have 3 other units that you're going to rent out at whatever the rent is. You're probably going to have to go through each one and remodel each one better, and then get rid of new tenants and get new tenants in. I helped a lot of agents up that I've dealt with up in certain areas do this. And they have like 4 of these now, and they get enough rent from all of these to pay for their mortgages on everything else and still have enough to pay off everything.
Well, tell
And
people a
that's
little
over
bit of what
time.
you're going through then with your book, because it sounds to me that there's lots of real estate books out there. There's lots of different things. What makes yours different? I can already tell based upon what you've said, because I've read them, I've taken the courses, I've gone to those expensive ones with it, but you're coming up with some very distinct ideas that I hadn't considered. What is let's talk to my son, the 23-year-old son, and how it is that your book is going to walk him through and make his experience of building wealth through a home better.
Well, he's going to understand what is going to be required of him, right? And he'll understand that he can do it. The biggest thing I run into is people have good credit, some money for down payment, and a good job, think they can't buy a home. People who don't have that think they can buy a home. It's the weirdest thing, right? But so what I'm saying is most people can't do it on their own in the beginning, but their parents can help them co-sign on this and say, here's what the deal is. Until you buy me out of this property, we're splitting the equity. Nothing's for free in this world. My dad taught me 3 things: how to duck, nothing's free in this world, and life's not fair.
That sounds a little bit like Dodgeball the movie, but
what I'm getting at is you have to work a deal with your kids, because what if you do this for one of your children and they're like, I don't want it now. Well, now you own it. Well, that's okay, because now you're in the real estate game. Because if you went to buy a 4-plex by yourself, you're putting 25% down. If you buy it with your kid, you're putting 3.5% down. That's a huge difference.
And why is that? Why is it that you're having to put so much more down?
Because one, if you're doing it by yourself, you're not going to live there. So it's an investment property. So that's 25% down. 20% down on investment property, the rate's too high and the cost is too high. You have to go 25% down in this market these days. And so when you have your child go in there, you're doing it FHA with 3.5% down. Or you can do conventional with 15% down. The difference in that program is sometimes you don't get all the rent under the FHA program to offset what you need to qualify. But if you go in there and so he needs to be able to do this on his own, but you can give him the money for the down payment. You can do all that. Because if you're on there as a non-occupying co-borrower with him, that changes everything.
What a great concept. I was talking to my older brother, and he's got his beautiful home, and he was talking about his kids growing up, and the one's in the Navy, so he'll be able to get a better loan. But some of the others, you're like, how do you do it? This is a great concept of what you're talking about, and getting these rentals and be able to be a part of it. And if your son defaults and now all of a sudden you still keep, when I say default, backs out, then you've got a great rental property that you've been able to do. And as a guy that I was mentioning to somebody else that there's right now, they'd mentioned 3 of the places that have the least affordable housing in the country: El Paso, Texas, crazy. Spokane, Washington, I can see it's a beautiful part, and now Boise, Idaho. But I can tell you, I have found different 4-plexes, 2-plexes, 3-plexes. They're out there, even in one of the most difficult markets in the whole entire United States.
But now you know how to buy it with your kids, so that you don't have to put 25%.
Well, we made a lot of them. I've got 5 of them, so I guess I can do that multiple times.
It's really, I look at things differently than other people. It's like how I have to get around problems all day long. That's what I look at. How do I get around this problem legally, with pushing the thing without breaking the law? And this is all legal stuff. The biggest thing, if you ever hear someone say this is a house hack, 9 times out of 10 it's illegal. You can't do it with the loan program that they're trying to do, because it's been tried before. They're just younger and newer at it, and they have no idea about it. Because I hear the stuff all the time. It's like, no, that won't work. The easiest way is when your kids are young and they're going to want to buy, but they're not ready. But you can help them by putting them in a duplex or a triplex or a 4-plex. And they can see how that's going to affect what they can see the rents coming in. That helps pay the mortgage down. Their mortgage, instead of $2,800 a month, is $700 a month, because they have rent and all the other units. It might not pencil 100% the first time, the first one, but once you clean it up and get it going, then you're going to start making money on these things.
Well, especially with you're talking 70% of the populace going to need to rent. And tell people how to find your book.
Easiest way, get edsbook.com.
Get edsbook.com.
I did that. It goes right to my website, the book page. You click on the button, takes you right to Amazon because nobody can ever spell my name
Yeah,
right.
we discussed that first. I asked, how do you say it, Parcaut? But I wouldn't out of French, so
Right.
20% French. But
Right. You had to rub that in, didn't you? So it's Ed Parcaut, Parcaut, but everybody messes up. Even I was on a podcast and they posted it. They got everything right in the podcast, but on the title, they added an extra A in.
There you go. They completely mess up the last name. So get edsbook.com and it sends you to their Amazon page. This is, I loved having you on because those are typically the best guests where I'm learning a ton as I'm going through it on something. I try to make money in all kinds of different ways, and I have loved real estate. Give us some good news. Tell us something to finish off, Ed. I'm super grateful to have you on here, but finish us with some Ed wisdom.
I don't know if there's Ed wisdoms, but what I'll tell you to do is buy that house now.
Yeah.
Because what you're not going to understand in 5 years from now, you're going to look back and this is the time. It was actually 5 months ago, but this is better than it's going to be in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. Yes, the payment's going to be harder to afford. It is actually an investment now. 2 years ago, it was like, okay, well, I can rent for $3,000 or I could buy a house for $2,700 a month. I should buy a house. Now it's okay. It's going to be $3,700 a month. This is just an example. That's $700 more than I really want to. That's an investment though. Your rent is you might as well go throw it in the street because that's what you're doing every month. You're throwing your money away for somebody else to pay their mortgage. You need to understand buying a home is an investment in your future. That's what you need to do.
Well, Ed, thanks for being on. I've learned a bunch. And getedsbook.com. Did I say it right?
You did. Getedbook.com.
Yeah. Thanks for being with me.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.